Most people grow amaryllis in a pot, and they usually have it in a nice southeast facing window, and they enjoy the flowers for a long time. I think this year I counted I had 57 amaryllis bulbs. Most of them needed repotting. Generally you leave them in the pot while you store them over winter, and it was too much for me to do this year. So I put these in all these storage trays. I drilled holes in the corner so they wouldn't get too much water in them. And I put them in there. I just set them like this in my storage tray, 6, 8 at a tray, and put my potting soil mix on them, and off they went. And the only thing different from this than having it in a pot is I have 3 trays full of these things, and none of them made a baby. Normally speaking, when you grow them in a pot, they will make a new one. It'll come up the side, and after several years it'll be almost as big as a parent, and you'll have two sets of tops on it, and you can have multiple flowers off of basically 2 bulbs in the same spot. But anyway, I had to plant them in those trays because making all these videos and getting older and doing a garden and keeping 2 places going, sometimes you run out of time. And they did quite well. You can tell by the roots they were happy where they were. Now these have been out of the ground for probably 3.5 weeks. All this lightweight stuff here, see, these are the roots that are still great. All this older stuff that's brown, I'm not ready to pot these up yet, but if I was going to pot these up, I would go through here and take all of the light, dead, brown, small fibrous roots off of it. Something that big, with that many roots, I would probably take that many roots off just like that. And then I would go around, and anything that looked really old or diseased or weren't putting out lateral roots. See how that root has 3 or 4 roots off of it? Some of them don't have any. It's really a judgment call. This needs roots coming out all around it. See, this side's only got 5 or 6. This side has a dozen. You might want to even it up a little bit. You don't want to ever cut them all off or you're in trouble. It will come back as long as there's something up here. And the other little secret is this plate on the bottom bulbs. Most bulbs, true bulbs, have a plate on the bottom. And if it ever dries out and all the roots are gone, the bulb's useless because it has to come out of that plate. Sometimes you'll see a plate on an iris, and you can pop it off because it's got a new plate grown underneath it. But without that plate, it won't grow. But most people grow them inside. And right now, if I wanted this to grow and flower at Christmas, it's too late. I've been later every year. I used to get these, I'd take them out of the ground in September, let the tops dry out, cut them off. I cut some of these a little short. You wanted about 2 fingers, about 2 inches. But these were getting taller and taller, and the stems were getting bunched up, trying to come out of an even smaller opening. So I knew I had to do something. So this year I cut them back. I cut them back too close. I should have cut them at least 3 inches, so that if any of this went bad, I could cut it off and not get down here flush with the bulb. And amaryllis, I can tell you one thing: if you let that sit vertical and water gets in it, it'll die in a heartbeat. It won't take anything to kill it. They will rot in a minute. So anyway, if I had wanted these to bloom at Christmas, I would have had to planted them about the 1st of October in new soil. This dust off this potting soil I got in here got in my throat. But I'm going to save these over the winter, and I'll clean them up and get all the old stuff off, and then I'll just store them. And it's the same old thing. If they get too wet, they rot. If they get too dry, all these roots dry out, and you don't want them to dry out. And I generally just, they're best to be left in the pot all year, but since they're not in the pot, I'm probably going to put them back in the storage trays and put soil over all the roots just to keep the roots alive. And then next year, you will see the stuff coming out. Once you see the green foliage out, you got to get it in a pot. Now, if this had been your potted plant and you were smart enough to put it outside in the sunshine, because if you ever have one of them quit blooming, and you go, man, how can I make it bloom? I don't know anybody on the planet that can tell you that. I've asked call-in gardening shows, and they would talk and pontificate a while, but no answer. The secret, if they quit blooming, as long as they're a healthy bulb and have leaves up, is you need to take these things and put them outside when it gets really hot, 75, 80 degrees, and nighttime temperatures maybe in the 60s, and just bury the pot in the ground and just let the sun get on it. And the next year, you'll get a flower back. It's that simple. They don't like absolute bright sunshine in the middle of a field all day long beating on them. They like more of filtered light, but they can stand 4 or 5 hours of sun. Now, the evening sun's the hottest. You should always remember that. The morning sun warms things up, but it's already warm when the evening sun goes down. So anything on the west side of your house gets baked compared to what's on the east side of your house. The afternoon sun's always hotter. That's the one you want to stay away from when you're planting things that are susceptible to a lot of temperature and heat. And then when you take that plant out of the ground after the foliage dies back or the frost has nipped at it, they like to be on their sides. You take that pot in the house, and I would put it in a big storage container and lay every pot on its side. Now, if I had enough pots right now and the time to do it, I would pot every one of these up in pots and lay them on the side. This is the first year I've done it this way. Last year, I let them all dry out, thoroughly dry. If you got them in the house, you quit watering them. When it's like in Virginia, you know, late August, first week of September or so, you just quit watering them. And the plant will start to slow up. And then when it slows up, you cut the foliage off. You'll see them drying up and shriveling and turning yellow. And you lay the pot on its side. On my back porch is nice because it rarely gets to freezing. And it's generally between 40 and 55 degrees. And then when you want to get it started, which is going to take at least 6 weeks, for it to flower, maybe even 8, but you would take the pot out and just put it in a warm place and water it really heavy with a saucer underneath and let it sit in the water for a day or two with the saucer under your pot, and then pour the excess water off of it, and it will sprout. If it's going to come, it's going to come quick because they grow fast. These things get 3 or 4 feet tall in a matter of several months. Now, a lot of bulbs start with foliage first and then send out the flowers. Younger bulbs, I think, sends out the flower spike first. You'll see them in the store. It's very short little leaves, but they got a flower spike. When they get more mature, they send out the leaves first, and then they send out the flowers. And you can have 4 spikes on them, and you can have 16 flowers on them. I think the most I've had on one was 12, maybe 11 on one bulb. Some of these bulbs are 10, 12, 15 years old. And then once it starts growing, you just manage it, and you don't ever want it to get too wet, and you don't want it to dry out. And then if you put it in a clay pot and then put that in a saucer, when that flower head gets up there, it's a lot of weight. And if it's 2 or 3 feet above this plant, and you got it in a plastic pot, it can fall over. And generally you have to take a wire brace and brace the flower stalks because they do get heavy. And then when the flower opens up, it's hanging way over the plant, you know. So it's just a lot of weight, so you have to hang them up. They make a little wire deal that goes around them and sticks on the side of your pot, and it'll keep it up. It's something that's also used for orchids. And just wait for it to flower. And when it flowers, if you have 4 flowers on your plant, one will open first, then the next one, like every day or so, until you've got 4. One time I had 5 for some reason on one stem. And then when the first one dies, you need to cut it back past the little seed node. You'll see a little swelling on it. That's where it's going to make seed. And when the first flower fades, you cut that off, because you don't want it to use any of the bulb energy to make seeds, because you want it to make another flower next year. And as they droop and sag and dry up the flowers, cut them off. And then after the stem starts to dry out a little bit, you cut the stem off, 3 or 4 inches above the plant. And then that's generally when you wait till warm weather and put it outside so it can rejuvenate itself. And then you start the process over the next year. I still got a lot of work to put all these things up. Thanks for watching.